See.
Yeah, as we understood the basic principles of process safety, right? I will be showing you some kind of incidences that has occurred and touched to the heart of the human being, that if we do not pay the required attention to the process or process safety, okay, up to what extent the losses may be there, right? So it will give you that kind of glimpse, right? Yes. So in memories, if we go right, we all know that the 1984 Bhopal gas tragedy has opened up the eyes of all Indians, right? In earlier days, we were with the attitude that chalta hai, koi farak nahi padta, right? So that was already changed in the 1984 incidents. Okay, so what exactly it was? There was release of toxic gases, right? In fact, MIC, methyl isocyanate, right? About 40 tons of methyl isocyanate escaped from Union Carbide plant, right? So that was the reason of Bhopal gas tragedy. Immediate causes and erupts and release fumes. Okay, so those were the reasons, right, behind the 3,000 persons dead, right, because of respiratory failures. Thousands more died in weeks that followed. Okay, so which was we were not accounting, right? But the informal figure was around 20,000 people were died, right? Around 5 lakh were the sufferer directly or indirectly, right? And the money that has been spent on to have the rehabilitation kind of works, either in technically or by virtue of investment in rehabilitation, was around USD 470 million, right? So this was how the losses were there in terms of men, human, and in terms of money, right? Yes. Then there was another incident which was again in the same year, right? And that is Premex. Premex is a liquid petroleum gas distribution plant. Okay, Premex is located a few kilometers north of Mexico City, right? So that is also was very catastrophical in nature. Plant was about 25 years old and built to 1950 API standards of the US, right? So however, the standard was good enough to refer, but it was 25 years old, and around 15 of 48 vessels were in BLVE in domino fashion, right? Around 550 people killed, 2,000 people received severe burns, and 7,231 people classed as injured, right? So this data appears was very official and real too, right? Then the another incidence of Chernobyl, right? On 26th of April 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear reactor that was in Ukraine, right? Large area of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus evacuated, around 3,36,000 people resettled, right? So this is how we can judge the catastrophe of this incidents, right? Fewer than 50 direct deaths, but thousands of cancer related cases were there. Okay, in the latter stage we find that thousands of cancer cases were responsible, right? Severe damage to the environment, right? So it was something radioactive kind of hazard, and therefore that cancer related cases and by birth some some problems were there to the infants, so like that. Yes. Then another incident in 1988, that is Piper Alpha, right? World's most famous oil rig disaster in North Sea, that is in 1988. 167 out of 229 people died, right? So this you can underscore, right? Initial explosion followed by a fierce fire, which in turn triggered off a further series of explosions, right? So this was how it was happened, right? Jump and try or fry and die. So that kind of words you can realize, right? Flames could be seen at around 100 kilometer away, right? So this was how the incidence was. Cause of death: 109 out of 137 recovered bodies, inhalation of smoke and fire. Few died of burns, right? So this was how the incidence was, right? Then in 1991, bright sparklers, right? On 7th of May 1991 at about 3:45 p.m., fire ignited from product testing activities. Okay, fire spread, causing an explosion which caused the rockets to fly everywhere, spreading the fire to other places and buildings. Okay, the fire and explosion destroyed the entire factory. 23 people lost their lives and 103 others sustained injuries, right? So these kind of incidences, if you look at, we will able to understand the importance of process safety, right? Yes, in more recent, BP Texas City Refinery in 2005, there was a vapor cloud explosion on March 23, 2005, killing 15 workers and injuring more than 170 others, right? On October 30, 2009, the OSHA imposed about $87 million fine on the company for failing to correct safety hazard revealed in 2005 explosion, right? However, BP announced that it would challenge the fine, but anyway, this kind of fine will tell us how much the gravity of the incidence was, right?
Maybe a small comment, sir.
Yeah, please.
So, before lunch, when we were talking about safety, I mentioned that the consequence could be the damage of your email. And the two incidents, sir mentioned, one Piper Alpha and this Texas City Refinery, that is absolutely damaged this email. Now, BP is tagged as a very unsafe company, very unsafe transport. Those two incidents I was they were really serious one, really damage. Apart from this 87 million fine in this, but the damage to their brand is
yes.
not
Generally, we do consider that process safety. If you look at it, may save the live beings and the monetary inventories, right? At the same time, the third one also we have to consider, and that is the brand value, right? The reputation of the company, right? Everything goes if such kind of incident happens, right? So in addition to the live beings and the monetary inventories, right, we have to look at your brand value also, so that in future how the people will be looking at you, right? So all those things are very important.
That means the name of that company should be safe.
Yeah, and that should be at your prime focus while looking at the process safety aspects, right? Then again, Imperial Sugar, that is in Georgia, USA in 2008. On February 7, 2008, it was occurred. Sugar dust explosion, right? So you might have heard the granary explosion also. In some storage facility, some grain we have to store, right? For example, the godowns of government, wherein large quantity of feeds has to be stored, right? and such kind of practices. Okay, so you do not know that fire may take place because of any such material which can take fire, right? The explosion, I mean the dust of the grains, okay, if forms such a mixture, right, which can take the spark and get ignited, and if that happens it will destroy the entire storing facility, and whoever are involved, I mean human being, so all will be sufferers. So instead the facility and the concerned cost, okay, everything will be at stake, right? So such care has to be taken, right? The ventilation and all those things, if you might have taken in consideration while designing of the storage facility, that would not have occurred, right? Yes, so sugar dust explosion, it's something like that, around 14 deaths and injuring 38 others, including 14 with serious and life-threatening burns, right? So that was the extent. Then again another recent, that is in 2010, deep water horizon, right? So deep water horizon was an ultra deep water dynamically positioned submersible offshore oil rigging rig owned by Transocean, built by Hyundai, leased to BP. So that was the description of the deep water horizon. On April 20, 2010, blowout turned fireball, killing around 11 persons, sank on April 20, oil gushing into the sea, causing massive pollution. Okay, so that was what the extent of damage to the environment as well as to the living beings and the facility. Then another one, that is Fukushima, very recently, in 2011, okay, on March 11, 2011, nuclear meltdown following earthquake and tsunami. So very recently it was, and many people were trapped who visited China or Japan during that period, right? So 6 reactors were designed by GE, full meltdown of reactor 1, 2 and 3. So it was some technical data. No immediate deaths due to direct radiation. At least 6 workers exceeded lifetime legal limits for radiation. So this was the effects. More than 300 received significant radiation doses, impacted Japan's energy policy. Okay, so in pre-era, Japan was behind to install the nuclear facility to meet out their energy demands. Okay, but after this accident, now it is thinking what should be the alternate one, right? So it has changed the energy policy of Japan. Yes, then Thai petrochemicals. Okay, that was in 2012. On May 12, 2012, explosion when workers were cleaning chemical tank at a synthetic rubber plant, right? And you can see the figure itself telling us the catastrophe of the incident. 12 people dead, more than 100 injured, right? Iran petrochemical, again in the same year. On Friday, August 3, 2012, there was a fire at Imam Khomeini Petrochemicals Complex, southwestern city of Manshar. At least 6 dead, dozens injured. Okay, and the reason was gas leaking. Yes, Petronas gas in the same year, 2012. Okay, explosion at Petronas plant in Paka. May 10, 2012, gas processing plant with the this specified area 2, 2 dead, 23 injured, right? So sometimes the number of people may be less, but the damage to the facility, damage to the environment, if it is more, then also the extent of catastrophe or hazard we have to judge in the desired way, right? Then suspected gas leak to storm water drain. Okay, so all those things was the effect. Then again another incident in 2012, that is Petronas Karigli. Fire at Tukau B drilling platform 31 nautical miles from Miri. Okay, on June 12, 2012 at 9:20 am, 16 people were working, 5 injured, various degree of burns was the reasons, right? And living quarters in Takua A. And then there are many others incidences, right, which open the eye to the thinker, and therefore the process safety is to be at first. Yes. Then what the hazards are in process industry, that we will be discussing in short, right? So there are 3 major kind of hazards which may be take place in the industries, and those are fire, explosion, toxic release, right? So basically in these 3 types the fire hazards you can classify, right? Fire means there will be impacts on plant, people and environment also, right? May also followed by toxic release, okay, because the fire may lead to increase in temperature, and that increase in temperature may lead to the damage of the storage vessels wherein the toxic chemicals might have stored, and because of that there may be rupture of material of construction of that storing tanks, and therefore the release of toxic material may be there, right? So fire can lead to many aspects, okay. Explosion, same, likewise fire, right, but it will be having with more severity, right? It will be exploding, and therefore because of impact also there will be the impact, right? Because of the impact of explosion also there will be the impact on facility and living being and all other things, right? And then the toxic release, okay. So independently toxic release is in absence of fire, in absence of explosion also toxic release may be there, right? Because of certain failure of your process wall, the process pipings and like that, right? So these 3 are the reasons behind any hazards, you can say, right? Impacts of people and environment, for example Bhopal gas tragedy, right? As I told you that the release of methyl cyanide was the reason behind Bhopal gas tragedy. Yes, now if you talk about the fire, right, fire needs 3 things, okay. I mean any material to burn, right, needs 3 things, okay. The first one is fuel, okay. Fuel means which has the ability to burn, right. Fuel means such material which is having ability to burn some calorific value, okay, if it is, right. And then it needs air, right. Without presence of air material cannot be burned, right. So fire can take place if there is presence of fuel, if there is presence of oxygen, and there is some ignition source, right. If any is absent out of these 3, okay, fire cannot take place, right? If there is no ignition, okay, fire will not take place. If there is no oxidizing agent or oxygen, fire will not take place, right? And again, that's too under some limits, okay? Even all three are present, right? Still fire may not take place, okay? If there is the presence of fuel under the limit, I mean lower than LFL, lower flammability limit, and higher than higher flammability limit, okay, then also even in presence of all three, fire will not take place, right? If the fuel will be present in between the concentration of LFL and UFL, then only fire may take place, okay? If it receives the oxygen and concentration means in the mixture of fuel and oxygen, right? Whatever the composition or concentration of fuel is, right, that should be in that zone, then only after receiving the ignition it will fire, right? So these things we need to understand so that the safer design of the process we can do, right? So oxidizer means the the molecule contain oxygen or atoms, right? So either oxygen or any other oxidizer you can assume, right? Then in gases, oxygen, nitrous oxide is also can play the role of oxidizer. Then in liquids, hydrogen peroxide, okay, H2O2 is also oxidizer, right? And then in terms of solid state, there is ammonium nitrate, okay, so that is also plays the role of oxidizer, right? And then fuel you can list, okay, there is liquid fuel, there is solid fuel, there is gaseous fuels, right? So in terms of liquid fuel, gasoline, acetone, ether, pentane, okay, all those are volatile and can be flammable, so you can list out. Then the solids, in solids some plastics also can get fire, wood, dust or wood dust, and then fibers, metal particles, okay, flowers, as I told you, the greenery and all, right? In terms of gases, acetylene, propane, carbon monoxide, hydrogen, LPG, and that kind of you can list out, right? And ignition source means some spark, okay, it may because of short circuiting in the electric circuit, right? Some friction, okay, some friction may give you the ignition, and because of that, if already the composition of fuel and air is there in the LFL and UFL limit, in between these two, okay, it will be taking fire, right? I mean happening the fire, okay? So spark, flames, static electricity, some heat, okay, so those are the sources of ignition. Yes, now there is some list, okay, showing you the distance of effect comparison, right? I mean at what distance it will be catastrophical in nature and all those things, right? So I will not go detail into this, but it gives the safer distance, okay, either to the human being or to the facility other than the targeted process, right? Yes, then there are many types of fire. There may be pool fire, right? So in terms of pool fire, we need to understand that the liquid, if spilled, right, liquid fuel if spilled onto the ground, spreads out to form a pool, right? And by getting certain ignition source, okay, it will be firing, right? And how it will be looking like, you can see, okay. Volatile liquid, for example petrol or gasoline, evaporate to atmosphere and soon form flammable mixture with air, right? So, and that flammable mixture, if receives ignition source, it will be firing like this. Okay, upon ignition, a fire will burn over the pool. Okay, the heat vaporizes more fuel. Okay, because of then fire, there will be heat, generation of heat. Okay, and that heat will be responsible to get vaporize another liquid fuel. Okay, which is spreaded. Okay, and therefore again and again the extent of fire used to take place because of the more vaporization of the liquid fuel coming into vapor state and then getting burned, right? So to douse such a kind of fire is very challenging and difficult, okay, because of this reason, right? Danger to people is by direct thermal radiation and burn. Okay, so thermal radiation also there, and the burning, it's that kind of sensation. So you see the facility used to be created around that prospective or possible sites in such a way that automatically there will be fire extinguisher working, right? By sensing the heat, by sensing the temperature, right, automatically they will be opening their valves and will be fighting like this. You see the second figure, right? So without manpower or the decision of manpower, automatical systems are already in place now. Then the jet fire, okay, something because of rupture or because of sudden release in one particular direction, right, and the material gets then the ignition source and fire. Okay, so in that direction the fire will be. Okay, so that kind of fire is known as jet fire. You see here in one particular direction only it is spreading, right? So we have to make our strategies accordingly. If jet fire happens, what should be our remedies? If pool fire happens, what should be our remedies, and so on, right? High pressure release of gas from a vessel or pipeline ignites almost immediately. This gives rise to a giant burner of flame, lengths tens of meters. Okay, so in one particular direction the length we have to handle with, right? Danger from thermal radiation and also impingement on adjacent pressurized vessel such as LPG vessel, heating the content followed by pressure building up, okay, causing boiling liquid expanding vapor explosion, that is BLEV, right? Sometimes called torch fire, because torch also gives you the light in one particular direction, right? So something like torch fire will be there. Yes. Then flash fire, okay, fire due to vapor cloud below explosive limit. Okay, so suddenly it will be giving us the fire because of certain limited exposure of vapor cloud, right, resulting from spillage of relatively volatile, that is propane, butane, okay, LPG material due to rapid evaporation. Okay, people at risk from thermal radiation effects. So this may be the impact, usually unexpected event and short duration. Okay, as the name itself suggests, flash fire means it will have some formation of cloud and will get burned. Okay, and after sudden time duration, some time duration, it will be okay enough. Okay, but that also gives you the impact. Okay, if some human beings are there, so they will face the problem. Some other facility, if gets damaged because of that flash fire, okay, the associated hazards will be there. So all those things we have to take consideration in the design or in the practice approach. Yes, then vapor cloud explosion, right? So as I told you, the vapor may be of some solid particles like grains. The vapor may be some liquid fuel, and it has got evaporated. So those vapor, right? The cloud will spread from two reach to through flammable range to too lean, right? As I told you, there will be some LFL, there will be some UFL, right? If the concentration is below LFL, fire will not take place. If above the HFL, fire will not take place. But if it is in between, fire will take place, right? So you can see the things in that aspect, right? Edges start to burn through deflagration, right? Steady state combustion it is called, right? Cloud will disperse through natural convection, right? I mean, it will be getting increase and increase through the natural convection. As we know, the density of air and how it travels from the lower range to the upper range. So in that way we can understand that the flame velocity will increase with containment and turbulence, right? Then if velocity is high enough, cloud will detonate. Okay, so again, depending upon the velocity of the release of material or the velocity of the wind, the direction of the wind, okay, all those things will be playing their parts. If cloud is small enough, with little confinement, it cannot explode. Okay, so this is how the LFL, UFL, if you understand, we can design the safer process. Yes, then factors favoring overpressure of vapor cloud. Okay, so again, the pressure of release and that kind of thing we need to understand. Confinement. Okay, if we design some confinement to the storage tank of some liquid fuel, right? So to design that, again we need to understand the things, right? It prevents combustion product escaping, giving higher local pressures even with deflagration, right? Creates turbulence, precursor for detonation, right? Then cloud composition, highly unsaturated molecules are bad due to high flammable range, low ignition energy, high flame speed, etc. Right? And again, weather also plays a great role. Right? Stable atmosphere leads to large clouds. Low wind speed encourages large clouds. So the natural, weather also can play the role to decide the extent or catastrophic nature. Yes. Then vapor cloud size impacts on probability of finding ignition source, likelihood of generating any overpressure, and magnitude of overpressure. Right. There is another factor, that is source. So flashing liquids seems to give high overpressure. Then vapor system needs very large failure to cause UVC, slow leaks. I mean, in terms of distance, you have to judge UVC. Slow leaks give time for cloud to disperse naturally without finding an ignition source. High pressure gives mixing required for large combustion, and equipment failures where leak is not vertically upward increases likelihood of large clouds, right? So certain parameters, certain factors we have to understand, and that will be helping us to design the safer process, right? So again, this is the another incidence or case study, you can say. So I will not again kind of repetition will do. You see the dust explosion, how it can causes, right? So combustible dust, okay, there is an ignition source, the dust is confined, Okay, some storage facility, if not properly ventilated, then those will be confined and forming flammable mixture, right? There is an oxidant if present, dust is suspended in the air at a proper concentration, and the fire will take place, right? Not only fire, it can explode also. Yes, then hazards from toxic substances, right? Some sources of toxicants like toxic release, then fire and explosion leading to release of toxicants, right? Route of entry again, right? So the toxic release may give you the immediate effect, okay, but certain environment wherein the human is put into for work, right, if get exposed for longer duration, for months, for years, right, so because of certain routes of entry, that material may get into the body of that particular person, and after some duration, maybe after years, 3 years, 4 years later, he will be feeling the problem, right, and there will be such diseases which is incurable. So for example, we visited to the Bhandara Ordnance Factory facility, right? So they work in various aspects of TNT, then ammonium nitrate and many other sensitive plants, right? The workers employed there, right, maybe suffering from sleeping problem, maybe suffering from headache, right, and therefore they are allowed to do the duties only for 1.5 hours, 2 hours, and then they can go to their home. 1 hour, 2 hour in government facility itself, okay, where is certain norms used to be there, but because of these reasons, so that they may not get exposed, they may not get inhaled, they may not get injected, ingested, okay, by the critical limit of those hazardous chemicals, they are allowed to leave the facility even after 1.5 hours daily. Okay, so that kind of consideration we have to take in account, right? So you see here there may be various routes through which toxic chemicals can enter in our body and show their characters, right? So injection, okay, through cuts or through hypodermic needles into the skin usually cause highest blood level concentration, right? So through these things also that toxic material get into our body. Then inhalation through inhaled process, through mouth, through nose into the lungs, and then ingestions through mouth into stomach, and then gastrointestinal tract, okay, through dermal, okay, if your skin is getting exposed through this skin also the material get into your body, okay, and then they will play their role the moment its concentration becomes to a substantial level in your body, right? Yes, so if you try to define the toxicants, okay, so especially they are agents, okay, agents in terms of chemicals, okay, the chemicals may be organic solvent, pesticides, okay, lead, etc. Okay, in terms of physical, if you look at, so those may be dust, fibers, noise, radiation, okay, so those behavior has, okay, asbestos, etc. And then some carcinogenic materials are also there, right, and because of their inhalation and all, right, one may suffer the health, right. Toxicity is a property of toxicant that describe its effect on biological organism, right. Maybe very toxic, then toxic, harmful. Okay, so those are the extent. Then toxic effects may be reversible, may be irreversible, right. If it is reversible, then it's okay. If irreversible, then it will be permanently damaging your life and health, right. It may be acute, it may be chronic, right. Local, systematic. Okay, local means wherever the exposure will be, only that part will get damaged. Okay, and some maybe the entire health will get affected, right. Yes, so with this brief and the understanding up to what extent the error in process safety may cost you, okay, so that glimpse I told, and certain principles in terms of fire, then toxicants and all those things, right. So I stop here.